please call the roll.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. For House Education, January 20th, 2025, Representative Bratton,
Excused.
Representative Erickson,
Here.
Representative Guggenmoss,
Here.
Representative Kelly,
Here.
Representative Lawley,
Here.
Representative Singh,
Here.
Representative Strock,
Here.
Representative Williams,
Here.
Chairman Andrew.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. House Bill 20 is now on the table for consideration. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, nice to see you. I come before you today sitting as the chairman of the Select School Facilities Committee. It's a joint committee that is tasked with keeping all of your school facilities across the entire state, somewhere in the range of like 4.5 million square feet worth of school facilities in order, make sure that we have major maintenance, everything along those lines. One of the new ones that has started bubbling up, and I asked Representative or Chairman Andrew to put this up first, is a nice, easy bill. What you have before you with House Bill 20 is the first bill that we passed out of our committee this past year. And it really is just a statutory cleanup bill. Pretty much does no different than what the original language did. This was brought to us by LSO. But it does take into account charter school leased facilities. And that's really the biggest issue that we have right now, is ensuring that our leased facilities for charter schools, as well as any other leased facilities within the state, are paid at the equal or lesser value to the square footage median in that same area. So really what we're doing is just making sure that we don't have leases that are going, way sky high across the board, and somebody's paying a extremely high lease for square footage in a charter school or a non-charter school for those types of facilities. And so what you'll see on the bill itself, if you look all the way down, we're in 21.3.110, and subsection B just has, we cross out not to exceed, where it would have said shall not exceed the average cost per square foot. Now what we say, just to make sure that we tighten this up, is be equal to the lesser of the amount of the total lease agreement or the cost per square foot of the lease. So it's whatever is lesser than. This is basically a savings to ensure that the state is not paying out more money than we should be when it comes to this. So with any of the technical questions, what this will ultimately do, I do have the department behind me if you need to ask them any serious questions. But as you will also see, there's no fiscal impact on this particular bill due to the expectation that this will be business as usual, just tightening up the language. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Chairman Brown? No questions. Thank you. Does the department have any comments on this bill? All right, thank you. Is there any public comment on this bill? Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the
Afternoon.
committee, I'm Ken DeCaria, Wyoming School Boards Association, and I just want to speak in support of this. It just provides clarity in these charters. As you know, now we're dealing with charters that are district authorized as well as the independent authorizer. This just clears up, that funding so that everybody's on the same page as far as what this dollar figure would be. And with that, happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Is there any further public comment? Oh, Representative Bratton, do you have a question for?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I'm so sorry because if you just went back to your chair and I didn't catch your name, but I was wondering if you could explain the change between the actual lease space and the allowable lease space? Or does that really? Or who would rather do that? Okay,
Whoever would like to
thank-
answer the question, go ahead.
Somebody answer this thing.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Bratton's good question. And what I will tell you first and foremost is this was the hardest committee I've ever sat on, let alone chairing. It takes a long time to pick up on everything. So the allowable square footage is based off of the ADM calculation. So each student receives a X amount. One of the things that we have across our state is prior to Campbell 3 and Campbell 4, we had school districts that were building their own schools. And so what you see is, like for Gillette, for instance, you'll actually have where the Gillette High School has excess square footage, and so they're not actually calculated for that particular square footage. So when we're making all the statutes with leasing and/or anything along those lines, we have to make sure that we're talking the same way about our charter school leases and everything else, the same way we're talking about our internal schools that the state has built. So we have allowable square footage based off of ADM versus actual square footage, which may or may not be more than what the model provides, basically. Does that answer your question?
Would you like a follow-up?
No, I was just going to say
Representative
thank you.
Brad.
It does.
It's a lot of information.
All right, committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Vice Chair Lally, seconded by Representative Erickson. Are there any amendments to the bill? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 20, K-12 school facility leasing do pass. Representative Bratton,
Aye.
Representative Erickson,
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss,
Aye.
Representative Kelly,
Aye.
Representative Lally,
Aye.
Representative Singh,
Aye.
Representative Strock,
Aye.
Representative Williams,
Aye.
Chairman Andrew.
Aye.
That is 9 ayes.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Let's see, House Bill 94 is now on the table for consideration. And I'm the sponsor, so I'll just go ahead and explain it real quick, but I'd like to ask Ms. Klein to come to the desk in case we have any specific questions about charter schools. So what this bill does is pretty simple. It does a lot, but it is simple. It removes the cap on the amount of state authorized charter schools that can be authorized by the state charter authorizing board. So this would essentially remove any limit on that, but it is certainly not unlimited in that they still have to go through a very rigorous process to get authorized by that board and meet quite a few requirements. The rest of it is just conforming amendments. Is there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, it's easy enough. Would the Department of Education like to comment on the bill?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the House Committee. My name is Wanda Maloney, and I am serving for the Department of Education, Superintendent Megan Degenfelder. Megan is in support of this bill. She believes that the number was arbitrary to support the negotiation of charter schools and is in support of removing that cap. Stand for any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. And at this time, we'll take public comment.
I'll start since I'm up here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Real quick, sorry, I forgot to get something in there. We'll put an individual limit of 5 minutes on public comment, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. Good morning. We're in the afternoon already. Sorry, my apologies. My name is Carrie Klein, and I represent the Wyoming Public Charter Schools Association. Just a few comments I would offer. You have taken some bold steps in the last couple of years as a body to create a path that ensures that our families in Wyoming have access to high-quality options when it comes to educating their children. We applaud your focus on continuing to make these options even stronger with bills like this one. The Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board was created to be the gatekeeper of authorizing high-quality applications with the authority to approve those who meet the standards of what we want our public schools to look like. This board has been in place since 2023. There is a wealth of knowledge and support that this board brings to the charter schools that it oversees. And it seems reasonable to ask these board members to review and consider schools through the duties that have been laid before them in statute. We don't want to see their efforts stifled by not having the opportunity to consider any applications until, as it currently stands, it would be March of 2029. Oppressing the growth of charter schools through a moratorium or any number, we feel is arbitrary. This process was thoughtful and it should be set into motion. If the moratorium is not lifted, we face a risk of a potential bottleneck of multiple schools wanting to apply at the same time in just a few years. Furthermore, there's a waste of expertise and talent on the current board that is being offered right now. If this board cannot consider an application until 2029, that means that the next public charter school through this authorizer will not be available until the school year 2030. Let's let that sit for a minute. That's at least 5 more years before this board can do what it has been tasked to do. As many of you know, within the current process, the board would not and could not stand up a public charter school overnight. If you look at the total process and the time frame that's outlaid in statute, it takes approximately 18 months from the time that they would apply in the March 1st through 30th window through the Department of Education, and then the approval or denial at a statutory 90-day period. And then upon that approval at the end of 90 days, there's another process where the applicant goes through a contract process, and then it has to have time to hire staff, secure the facility that they're moving into, submit in any kind of enrollment numbers to the department, et cetera, et cetera. So we'd argue that there wouldn't be something that's going to set up just fly by night. This is a very regulated process, and for good reason. So we ask you to continue to make this existing policy stronger by removing the limitation of the ability of this board to do its job. When their hands are tied like this, parents can't bring options and communities can't hope to provide something else for their community. We feel that a fair and clear path for this board to look at applications and make those determinations is what is really giving Wyoming the opportunity to innovate and for families to continue to get the educational freedoms that we all value. So I would happily answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you. Is there any further public comment? Good afternoon. Please state your name and where you're from.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chairman and respective committee members. My name is Jenny Sorensen. I'm a resident of Campbell County. I've been an 8th grade educator for 17 years, and I'm the mother of 2 public education children. I'm here to oppose House Bill 94, charter school authorization. And to start, my first question for the committee is, what specifically will charter schools offer that public schools do not? As I read legislator comments and heard testimony about this, I haven't heard anything specific regarding their merit or merit for tax dollars in Wyoming. I say this to address the unintended consequences of this bill. As the fiscal note states, school district expenditure increases could be significant, showing there is a likelihood that school districts will not be able to support both current public schools and future charter schools. Is this a risk we're willing to take? The loss of public schools is devastating for communities. I grew up in Bighorn County and saw the effect of closing schools in Byron, Deaver, and Franny. Growing up, those schools were not only a place for people to gather and watch basketball games or choir concerts, but also a space to host Girl Scout meetings, dances, and fundraisers, to honor veterans and senior citizens with meals and concerts. Sage Valley, where I currently teach, is used by our community to provide gym space for club wrestling and volleyball, for families to host graduation parties, like my daughter's, and for the Boy Scouts to put on a Pinewood Derby? Will charter schools be able to host community events like these? Will they have the space? I'm asking because the consequences of this bill won't happen for a few years. But when they do hit, your community will be devastated. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, thanks for being here. You did have a question for the committee about what do charter schools, what can they provide that the traditional public schools already do not provide? My response would be, although I could individually come up with some reasons, it's not my job here, that this is for local communities, schools, parents, and taxpayers to decide what that charter school may or may not bring, and not the state's job to tell local communities whether or not it's a good fit for them. So that would be my answer.
Can I respond?
Would you agree?
I would disagree, because my question would come back for regarding that merit. How can we guarantee that those decisions will meet the research and best practices of an educational system, especially when we're looking at public education, educating for all abilities?
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would again defer to the wisdom of local school boards and superintendents and communities to make those decisions for themselves rather than the one-size-fits-all policy from the state.
Can I ask a question? That's okay.
Sorry, the questions need to flow in.
That's
this
okay. Yeah, that's all right.
direction, but Thank
That's
you.
okay. Mhm.
Any further questions? All right, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Lindholm.
They turned it on for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tyler Lindholm. I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in the state of Wyoming. We stand on and in favor of this legislation, and this has a lot to do with a lot of your efforts over the last several years to expand choice in the state of Wyoming and opportunity in the state of Wyoming, realizing, in fact, that the best decision makers for a child's education starts right at home, and it starts with the parents. That being said, we also view this as an economic development opportunity. I'm in a little town called Sundance, and we have a public school. That's what we've got. Now, I'm not saying that a charter school is going to spring up overnight in little old Sundance, Wyoming, but what I am saying is the opportunity is there. And if we're going to look at these different types of opportunities and look at ways to advance that narrative, an arbitrary cap is definitely going to stifle that opportunity. In fact, in other states where charter schools have been in place for quite some time, what we've seen is that when there's a huge influx of people moving into an area, I'll give Chandler, Arizona as an example, which is now part of the greater part of Phoenix. I think anybody that's driven through that area recognizes that Chandler really doesn't exist anymore. It's part of Phoenix. But during that time period, there was a huge amount of people coming into the area, and the schools couldn't support. That's not a ding on public schools. I'm certainly not going to say anything negative about public schools. I'm a product of public schools. Maybe that's a ding by saying that publicly on the record, but there it is. There was a lot of charter schools that were able to pop up a lot quicker because they didn't have a lot of the arbitrary bureaucratic process in place. So by removing this arbitrary bureaucratic process, maybe that'll give us the opportunity if we ever do see an influx in some of our energy capitals, such as Casper and Gillette. And with that, I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Winter.
Mr. Chairman, I'm honored to go next, but to be honest, I'm sitting next to one of the heroes of charter schools, and I was wondering if we could potentially give him the opportunity to go first.
All right, Mr. Donnelly.
Appreciate being here. My testimony is very, very short. We were blessed to be able to open our charter school. We're in Mills, which is a suburb of Casper. My name, again, I don't know if the mic was on. I'm Russ Donley. I'm chairman of the board. Recognize some folks on the panel. I believe in school choice. It's that simple. To the person that spoke against it, I will say this. If she said we're competition, sure, of course we are. And to give you an idea, we have 300 students now, kindergarten through 7th. This is our second year. Next year, we're a Hillsdale charter school. We're a member school, actually, which is quite an honor because they come in and train our teachers and train our board and train our headmaster. And so we appreciate that and appreciate that blessing that's come to us. We have 300 students, and of them, 295 have re-upped. And the 5 that haven't re-upped for next year is because they're moving out. So I hope they're coming to Cheyenne so they can be in the Hillsdale Charter School here. But my point is that the kids are learning. Are we perfect? No, we're not, but we're striving to get better, and that will happen. I'm grateful that your statute allows us 5 years to prove our worth. I look for us to be much better this next year because we've had a year to do all the curriculum and learn it, which Hillsdale has. It's a wonderful curriculum, very, very strong. And I feel by our 3rd year that we will be competitive with our top schools in our district. We have in the Natrona County area, we have some not very good schools. We have some mediocre schools, and we have some that are very good. Okay? And that's in the public schools. And right now, we're kind of in that middle group, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to continue to improve and get better. And I think competition's great. I've supported charter schools for a long time. I sat in your chairs years ago. And as this gentleman beside me, we've been friends for a couple days. So my testimony is I encourage this. I think it's very good for the states.
And it's factoring in some of the confusion there, but thanks. Is there any further public comment? Please come forward and fill the chairs. That would be helpful if you plan to testify. All right, good afternoon. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, committee. My name's Exie Brown. I'm a private citizen here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And one thing I will tell you, when I was out on the campaign trail in from June through August, I had the privilege of talking to hundreds of wonderful parents discussing education. And one thing that they really wanted was more options, more choice. And it comes down to parental rights, of having to have the right to choose where and how their kids are educated. And I also agree with the gentleman earlier that competition is good. I've always believed in the philosophy that competition breeds excellence. This has been proven by several states that already have school choice, particularly Florida, where a report came out a couple years ago that showed that the educational standard and the scores have increased due to school choice, due to private and charter schools. And they increased not only in those schools, but also within the public government schools. And they also saw a decline in disciplinary issues such as suspensions and absenteeism. So I believe that I fully support this bill. I urge and I vote on this one. And I will tell you, there were a lot of constituents within my House district that support this as well. So I urge you guys to vote and aye on this. And if you got any questions, I'll stand by for that.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mullen.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. I want to start by making it abundantly clear the Wyoming Education Association does support school choice, and we do have a great selection of school choice across the state of Wyoming. That being said, I think something needs to be addressed here in terms of the framing that this is the only avenue that charter schools can use to get authorized. We have additional avenues that folks want to use. If this is about getting these charter schools off the ground, they can work with their local school board to become authorized. And in fact, we've seen some great charter schools who have performed really, really well, like Poder, who that collaboration with their local school district has really facilitated that. So this is not the only option for charter schools to be authorized. I do want to address a couple of other things that have been said earlier. There was the notion that this could be viewed as an economic development opportunity. We know for a fact that charter schools pay less than our public schools. Now, when you think about Chugwater as an example, if you're looking at fewer and fewer dollars within that local community because those teachers are earning less, that's going to be less dollars into that community. This is a built-in cost escalator for public education. So know that this will increase the overall cost on a yearly basis for public education. Aside from that, it will increase the per pupil funding amount. So we hear that a lot, right? The per pupil funding amount, what that looks like. That will increase. So again, I'm going to use Chugwater or maybe even Sundance as a example. Those smaller communities, you're still going to have that public school. You're still going to have those teachers within those grade bands and along those subject lines. You're going to have fewer students within those schools, so your per pupil amount is going to go up. This is, at the end of the day, a policy decision that you all are going to have to decide, but you need to be aware of that, especially given our current education funding predicament, that this is something that you need to be aware of in terms of the increased costs on a year-over basis. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Mr. Brown.
Chairman Andrews, Boyd Brown, Wyoming Association of School Administrators. Again, probably echo a little bit of what Tate said and then expand just a little bit. One of the things that will increase the cost of schools is that there's a misnomer that the money will follow students. And the money does follow students, but we're funded per school, not actually by each student. So if you're a larger district with larger schools, your funding per pupil is probably smaller. But if you're a standalone school that's fairly small, your per pupil allocation will be big. Like I said, I've been the superintendent in the largest and smallest district. In Claremont, we were about $40,000 per student, and that was to be able to do what we needed to educate the students there. Not nearly that high in Cheyenne with larger schools, although we did have some small rural schools that did drive that up a little bit. In school districts and schools, you get a 3-year rolling average for the district. So for 3 years, those students are going to be in the district and in that school, possibly for the 3-year rolling average, although they do move. But the money doesn't actually follow the student. The money follows each one of the schools that you have. So if you add schools, it's going to increase the amount of costs that you're going to have. Again, like Mr. Mullins said, it is a policy decision, but want to make sure that you are understanding that. When we put the cap on last year, one of my memories was that it was going to give us the opportunity to evaluate how those state authorized schools were doing. And again, we're only 1 year into it. We've got the new one that's going in Cheyenne this year. I believe that they're working on one up in the Afton Valley. So I think there's the opportunity to do that. Again, I think there are great charter schools, there are great public schools, there are public schools that struggle, and we try to do the best that we can to support them and move them forward. The Department of Ed has some rules and regulations that we have to follow to do that. So I think having the opportunity to slow down and make sure we're doing what we need to do is important. We testified on a bill, or didn't testify, we had some testimony on a bill this morning that may affect charter schools as well in the Senate Education Committee. So we're still working on some of those bills and some of the authorizing components of charter schools there. So I just want to caution us that we may want to do some evaluation before we move forward too darn fast with everything. And if I remember right, over the last few years, charter schools have been the largest escalator for public education. And with that, I'll stand for question.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's apparent you have a better familiarity with the landscape of public education across the state than I do. So I do have a question on the demand for charter schools in smaller districts, smaller counties, Niobrara County, Claremont District. Is there any demand in these smaller rural districts where they're already paying, due to economies of scale, much more per student? Because my experience, the reason I ask is my experience has been the more densely populated areas tend to be the ones that where parents tend to demand more school choice.
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, I believe you're right there. I would say that the Chugwater School is an anomaly to that, and almost all of the students from Chugwater are going to the charter school now. I believe there are a few students that are going to Wheatland. But I would agree with you. I think that there's the possibility of smaller areas wanting to do charter schools, which would increase the cost, though.
Follow up. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Any further public testimony?
Mr. Chairman,
Good
members of the
afternoon.
committee. My name is Christian Winger. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Prairie View Community School in Chugwater. I'm in full support of this bill because Chugwater, the Prairie View Community School would not exist today if it wasn't for this state authorized option. A number of families had tried through the years several times to start a charter school that was district authorized in Chugwater, and it failed. When we came along, we also tried the same avenue of starting that charter school being authorized through the district, and it failed. And so we relied on the option to apply through the state. So, it's pretty interesting that when our charter school, or the year before our charter school started, there was 28 students in the public school system in Chugwater. Today, we have 104 students in the public school system. And I say public school because the charter school is still a public school. Sometimes people like to act like it's not a public school or that it operates on a different level. Like, I still have to accept any student that comes. I can't charge tuition. I can't screen kids before they come. We're just a school of choice, and we have seen some pretty significant success in Chugwater. And so I agree, or I happen to believe that there's probably several small communities around Wyoming that would like to have this option also. And, I can't speak for them, but maybe they have tried to go the other avenue of getting an authorized charter school and have failed. And so I think it's important that we have this state option as a backup to these guys. Last thing I want to say is that we chose to put community in our name for a reason. And we literally brought together the community of Chugwater. So we have sports in our town. We host all kinds of community events in our town. It has really tied together a lot of what we stood for in the beginning. And we have a tremendous amount of community support. So, the idea that charter schools are going to get rid of that, that's certainly not something we have seen in Chugwater. So again, I'm supporting this bill.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Singh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry, can you repeat your name?
Christian Winger.
Thank you, Mr. Winger. My question to you, do you have any comments on the notion that charter schools are the biggest escalator for public education right now?
Chairman Andrew, through you. So yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. I've heard that a lot. And while I don't claim to be an expert of the block grant and how everything is funded, when Chugwater started, we started at a significantly a smaller amount of money than what we expected to start with. We're still, as Mr. Brown was talking earlier, we're still talking about some of the things right now, working through some of these legislations on how to fix some of that. But I certainly have not seen that. I can tell you that our school in Chugwater is not bringing in $40,000 per ADM. And so, I would argue, especially in the first year of my funding and continuing today still, that we have spent less money than the traditional school would have. So we had to start with our special education funding, we had to start with our transportation funding, we had to start all of that with startup funds that came somewhere other than the state. The state will pick that tab up in our second and third year, but we had to start that in the beginning on our own. And so I certainly haven't seen how that's going to drastically increase costs. And the other thing is that the Platte County School District, they didn't choose to close the school, they chose to not staff the school in Chugwater. So right now, the charter school in Chugwater that's in operation is the only school there. So there's not another public school. Platte County School District number 1 is not operating an additional school. So it's not 2 times the funding and we've got to have double the teachers in that community.
Any further questions? None. Thank you. Good afternoon. Please state your name and where you're from.
Good afternoon, Chairman Andrew. I am Dr. Diane Galloway. I was a public school principal, and right now I am the headmaster of the Cheyenne Classical Academy. I can tell you, in a city like Cheyenne, we're under great scrutiny. We have to do a better job. We have to recruit our parents. We have to offer them something that the public school doesn't offer them. And I can say that we're well on our way. We've only been open 5 months, but I feel deeply all of those responsibilities. I also have to do a lot more with less because I don't have a central office staff. The things that have to be done mainly fall on my shoulders. And our teachers are expected to do more and to give more and educate their students better. I think as we go in the long run, that kind of scrutiny is important for our charter schools. Charter schools have to prove that. I was just previously in the state of Texas as a university professor, but I placed student teachers in charter schools all through the greater Arlington area. And those charter schools had a great effect on the public schools that they had to up their game. It's just a fact of it. And when you become complacent about, well, you get the funding, you get the kids, they're going to walk in the door. That's when the failure of our public schools, and that competition is important for us. And I just take offense to people who will come here and testify and say that we're affecting the public school financing. We are a public school. There's no qualms about it. And just as you heard, I have to take every kid who comes through the door, and certainly with a lot less resource to educate them. So I think that it's important that you trust the authorizing board. They're full of some exceptional individuals. They have a new executive director who is really holding our feet to the fire. And that process is in place to trust that it's not going to be a willy-nilly authorizing of anybody who comes through. And I appreciate this committee's support. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, none. Any further? All right, public testimony is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Singh, seconded by Representative Ugenmas. Are there any amendments? Is there any discussion? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say really briefly that stay focused here on the arbitrary limit on how many schools can be authorized. And we're not discussing the merits of charter schools, good, bad, or ugly, but rather getting rid of this artificial bottleneck so more communities can open up the discussions.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Question.
All right, please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 94, charter school authorizations amendments do pass. Representative Bratton,
Aye.
Representative Erickson,
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss,
Aye.
Representative Kelly,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Singh,
Aye.
Representative Strock,
Aye.
Representative Williams,
Aye.
Chairman Andrew.
Aye.
That is 9-0.
All right, the bill passes the committee. Someone be willing to let Representative Harshman out there know that we are now on his bill. He's right there.
He's been pacing.
House Bill 36 is now on the table for consideration. Representative Harshman, would you like to walk us through the bill?
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. Thanks for hearing the bill. Bring to you House Bill 36, really brought to me by, through a constituent whose son went to Central Wyoming College to be an electrician, and the program is really one class a semester, and then for 4 years. Well, then you do work, right, as journeyman, and so the problem is with the Hathaway, you're not a full-time student, and then it runs out of time in 2 years if you're, depending on the program you have, if you're what Hathaway you qualified for. So this would allow the department really to work on those rules. So that's really why the bill was brought. The second part of the bill, and I'll walk you through the bill, Mr. Chairman, in a moment. Hathaway is a beautiful thing. I mean, it's Senator Tex Boggs and myself chaired the committee back in '04, I think it was. We were booming in oil and natural gas, Jonah Gas. And it's been really an important game changer to kind of just in high school education, I think, to motivate and do those things. And named, of course, a scholarship after Governor Hathaway. I insisted on that. Flew 50 bomber missions over Europe. Came back, ran for the ran for governor and had $80 in the general fund, and then realized we got to do something, and really went around and got the severance tax. Was booed at the statewide committee meeting because of that later, but then insisted on this permanent trust fund, and went out and captured really the coal industry for Wyoming, where it could have went to the state north of us with less overburden and more coal, frankly. But so what he did for our state and our country is really incredible, and to honor him with his name on it, I think is really important. But I keep hearing now, hey, all we're doing with this Hathaway is training our young kids to be smart so they can leave the state. And so I brought that a little, just like we do in WWAMI and WICHE. We require all WICHE, changed that about 5 years ago, except for veterinarians. If somebody wants to take that up, I think it'd be a good thing, make veterinarians come back to the state or pay back their WICHE loans, but they're the only WICHE program that's exempt from that. And of course, WWAMI students have to come back and practice in the state. So I just put that in there. It's probably, so I'll walk you through the bill, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay. Really two parts. You can see that on page 2, members, the definition of certificate then is changed. It's added to on line 9, the existing language. So that's all that does, and the rules would be developed to allow these, folks who are going through a journeyman program or whatever, that not being the full-time student would still allow to have the scholarship and maybe extend it for a period of time. So that's the first part of the bill that I explained was brought to me by a person in the state whose son just recently went through it. The second part of the bill is on page 3, and it's just, it adds a paragraph to 2116-1303. This paragraph, Romanet 4, on line 6, page 3, a 1-year work requirement or a 1 year to go on to graduate school, but to stay in the state. So that's it, Mr. Chairman, and I think the bills can survive independently without one of those sections on the will of the committee and the legislature, but really brought both those ideas in this bill. So I'd stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Would the department like to offer any comment on this bill?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman. Dickie Shaner speaking on behalf of State Superintendent Degenfelder on this bill. She doesn't have a position, but asked that I share just a couple thoughts. The first related to the Section A, Romanet 4. It was helpful to understand the intent behind the legislation. If a student is participating in a program at a community college, all of these things are already permissible and eligible for Hathaway. And so the question on this one is if it's attempting to apply Hathaway to a non-credit bearing course at a community college, which community colleges do have, there are two things we would need to look at elsewhere in the Hathaway scholarship. And it's related to having satisfactory academic progress, which is defined in the definition section of the Hathaway scholarship. And there are two key components to that. So we look at credit hours and we look at GPA. So whatever course or program a student was taking to, comply with this new definition of certificate, under statute at the department, we would need some way to assess that satisfactory academic